Rashad Bateman.
This hurts my heart.
It does hurt my heart here.
It's like remembering an ex that it was like a really bad breakup. Those were good times.
Man, like that was a good relationship. It just didn't work out.
We were maybe good, but we weren't the one. But I don't think it's good for my mental health to go back to that person. Can we really rekindle it?
Can we really rekindle?
If you can find a way to get the following players on your roster and stash them away, then I think it's going to benefit you to do so. We've got 6 names that should be stashed on every Dynasty roster. Guys that could be the needle in the haystack, okay? Do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you like Dynasty content. Let's get straight to it, though. 6 players, I'll go first.
Sure.
You know...
Oh, boy.
I think people are burying this guy. I don't think they should. A.T. Perry of the New Orleans Saints.
Okay.
That's right. We are talking about A.T. Perry. I really think there's some interesting unlocked potential here for Dynasty, for his value to potentially raise. On KTC, he's a wide receiver 91. In our flock fantasy community, he is wide receiver 141.
Oh, boy.
You guys are burying my guy in a coffin.
That's me. I'll raise my hand. I'm okay with it.
And you're burying him. All right, well, we'll talk about it. I have him as my wide receiver 84. Like, full transparency, I was not in on A.T. Perry coming out of Wake Forest. Didn't really love watching his film. Right. Round 6 hit rate. We know that's booty cheeks over the last 10 years. However, he did enough in his rookie season to pique my interest. He got his chance when Michael Thomas went down in week 10 with that season-ending injury, what ended up being the season-ending injury for him. You know, that's just a scheduled retweet every single year for Michael Thomas. But A.T. Perry, when Michael Thomas went out from week 10 onwards, was this team's ex-receiver alongside Chris Olave. He played 75% of his snaps out wide. And for me, I think he exceeded expectations. Before week 10, he played just 24 snaps. Then he got his opportunity. From week 10 onwards, there were reasons, at least in my opinion, to believe that A.T. Perry earned more opportunities next year. For example, yards per target. He was first amongst wide receivers.
Right.
He only had 18 targets, but he did the most with those targets. And by the way, on 18 targets, he scored 4 touchdowns in 8 games and averaged almost 8 points per game in fantasy. That's ridiculous. Like, on a per target, per touch basis, he was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL last year. If you look at points per touch, fantasy points per touch, running backs and wide receivers combined for the entire 2023 season, A.T. Perry stands alone at the top. He is number 1 in fantasy points per touch, over 5 fantasy points per touch. I think he's earned more opportunities. I mean, you can see some of the high-quality names in the top 10, Mike Evans, Gabe Davis, DK Metcalf, and I think he's going to have a chance to grow his role again in 2024. He's going to play a lot outside. It's A.T. Perry, it's Chris Olave, it's Rashid Shaheed. This team did not add another wide receiver of note. They just lost Michael Thomas. And Michael Thomas was the reason A.T. Perry got on the field. So I think he should be rostered in every league. And if you can find a way to make him a throw-in in a trade, I think you should do it because there's a chance this guy raises his value. What is it worth right now? A 4th? Maybe next year it's worth a 2nd. If you don't want to build around him, I still think there is that potential outcome.
Yeah, A.T. Perry definitely an interesting prospect. Once again, out of Wake Forest. Is it going to be, A.T. Perry or Rashid Shaheed? I think a lot of the community is going to be split on that. I don't like either of those guys.
I think between those two names, A.T. Perry has a better chance of like drastically improving his value.
And I think he's the cheapest as well. Like if you think of Rashid as well. So I completely agree. All right, going to my first stash player, a guy that I always draft as well on one of these last picks. I'm going home. Wan'Dale Robinson.
I like this.
On Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 78. On the Flock Fantasy website, 86. And for me, I think I'm pretty against consensus, wide receiver 63. And I think he easily could be rising in my rankings here. A lot of people write Wan'Dale off because he's on a bad offense with a bad quarterback, and I completely understand. There's no doubt about it. But let me remind you about the first 2 years of Wan'Dale Robinson in the league, right? In 2022, that's his rookie season. He was a second round draft pick going to, obviously, my Giants. He gets injured in week 1, and one of the first plays coming out, and he goes on IR and doesn't return until week 6. Weeks 6 to 11, we saw some exciting games from Wan'Dale Robinson, who was trending at the time at the time to be the wide receiver one in New York until week 11, where Wan'Dale Robinson had a career game and then tears his ACL against the Detroit Lions. And he went 9 for 13 for 100 yards, 19.4 fantasy points that game, tears his ACL. And that was with Daniel Jones, keep in mind. So Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll, Matt Kafka, the same offensive coordinator and play calling is still there. 3 out of the 5 weeks, Wan'Dale Robinson in that span scored double-digit points. Going into 2023 this past year, very similar to 2022, obviously gets ramped up, has a limited workload because of those injuries. And at the beginning of the season, the Giants clearly went to shambles early, right? The offensive line got injured. Daniel Jones tore his ACL, got injured, missed a couple games. The quarterback carousel with Tyrod Taylor and Tommy Cutlets. Shout out to Tommy Cutlets. We couldn't get anything going. But once we saw a glimpse of success, which was after the bye week, for Wan'Dale Robinson, we had a couple good games and stretches. I mean, if you remember the second half of the season, we saw really good games against the Green Bay Packers, against Philly, against the Rams. In that week's 14-18, he was averaging 4.8 receptions, 6.6 targets, over 75% of the snap share. And at that time, averaging 12.4 fantasy points per game. In that span, he was wide receiver 28. We're looking for these guys that could potentially be flex options for you. Obviously, if they soar to be, wide receiver one, that's phenomenal. But think about the flex options that can give you these double-digit points. And I will close with this. There's no doubt that Malik Neighbors is going to be the wide receiver one on this team. Okay, he's going to be getting the majority of the targets. He's going to be the superstar, the headache player, the wide receiver one. Wan'Dale Robinson is a supporting cast, and he is the second highest player that Brian Daboll has drafted on the offensive standpoint.
Sure.
Right? I mean, because there's Malik Neighbors was in the first round, Wan'Dale Robinson in the second round, and Jalen Hyatt was in the third round. Okay, so they love everything that Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be doing, and just a little sprinkle in there, even though it may not even help it. But CeeDee Lamb thinks he can have a breakout season. CeeDee Lamb say, hey, don't sleep on Wan'Dale Robinson. He's a great route runner, and the guy can get loose. So I think that's really exciting if you can get Wan'Dale Robinson at these prices.
The juice is loose. Riding down the highway in the Bronco. Flashbacks. Where were you? Where were you on that day?
Where were you?
A lot of you wouldn't be born. But I like this one. I really do. I think Wan'Dale, you're going to get a lot of people saying you're a Giants fan and we don't trust you. But I agree. Wan'Dale Robinson is a great stash right now. I am higher on him as he's my wide receiver 70 compared to Flock Fantasy Community and Keep Trade Cut rankings. He just needs to stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, he's one of those guys who does the most with each target. I mean, he is catching 76% of his passes through the first 2 years. That's ridiculous type of numbers. It also shows his usage, which is around the line of scrimmage, but I like it. Yeah. It is now easier than it's ever been to get a Dynasty team review from Badake and myself here on DynastyLand.
That's right.
You still have the same option where you can become a yearly Mother Flocker member and you get a free team review, but now we have also added a feature that you have been begging for. We've gotten so many DMs asking from people to do this. You can now purchase a single team review from us, no matter what code you use. Check out the comment down below. The a la carte store is available for you. It's never been easy to get every single Dynasty team that you want us to review reviewed in a very quick amount of time. Yeah. Every team review is getting turned over within the same week. So check out the pinned comment down below. 2 options. The second option now is that you can buy an a la carte team review on the website. We're trying to make it as easy for you guys as it's ever been. The website is as good as it's ever been.
That's right.
So go check it out in the pinned comment. All right. A player that I think we're all forgetting about that we shouldn't. Okay. And he should not be dropped in any league. He should be stashed. He's in a position that it takes time. Gotta let him marinate a little bit.
Yeah, marinate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Greg Dulcich.
Okay.
Greg Dulcich, my tight end 22. He couldn't stay healthy last year in 2023, but he had an extremely impressive, under-discussed rookie year. I mean, Greg Dulcich, in his rookie season, he dealt with injuries until week 6, but in week 6, he was activated. From that time onwards, he was averaging 8.6 PPR points per game, and from week 6 to 16, which, by the way, he had his bye week in there, he was a tight end 10 in fantasy football. And Greg, let's talk about how good that rookie season was, because, again, we don't talk about Greg enough.
Sure.
Greg is one of 11 tight ends in NFL history to average at least 3.3 receptions, 40 receiving yards, as a rookie. The other tight ends, again, 11 tight ends in NFL history that did that. Jeremy Shockey, Sam Laporta, Jordan Reed, Dalton Kincaid, Evan Ingram, Jordan Matthews, Kyle Pitts, Aaron Hernandez.
Oh.
We're not gonna talk about that, but some really good names in there, right? Guys who had really good careers.
Sure.
And Denver needs a receiving option to step up in 2024. Like, let's look at this offense right now. Courtland Sutton's their number one targeted player last year in 2023. Jerry Jeudy was their second highest targeted guy. He's gone. Their third, fourth, and fifth targeted players on their team were all running backs. Javonte, Samaje Perine, and Jaleel McLaughlin.
Yeah.
They are begging someone to step up. And unfortunately, Greg Dulcich couldn't stay healthy last year. I think this is the year he stays. If he can stay healthy, he'll make a huge impact in this offense. And they need him. They desperately need him. So don't sleep on Greg Dulcich. Get him in a throw-in trade. You know, if you're in a half-point premium, try and send a fourth-round pick. See what someone is wanting for Greg Dulcich. And a lot of your leagues, he'll be on the waiver wire. He's a perfect stash.
Yeah, and he's still young. What, 23, 22 years old? So I mean,
I think 23, 24 around that age.
He's not going to cost much, and he's not going to really affect. And if it doesn't work out, once again, you can drop him. These are guys that if they take the next step this year, you're happy that you stashed him or got him in that throw-in trade. All right, going to my next player here. Another guy I've kind of been talking about a lot in the offseason. Kind of took a step back, but I'm back on it, baby. Darnell Mooney is back here, and I love the value, okay, in my personal opinion. 81 on Keep Trade, wide receiver 81 on Keep Trade Cut. Flock Fantasy website, 78. For me, wide receiver 71. He is one of the most underrated players on a projected high-powered offense that could have a decent role coming into this year. Okay, Mooney has been on some of the bottom half of the offenses in the league for his whole career, and you can see it here. I broke it down in 2022, 23rd in the points per game, 27th in 2021, 23rd in 2022, and the best season, I guess the best offense, quote unquote, he has been on was last year with 19th in the league. Going to Atlanta with a new offensive coordinator in Zach Robinson, who made the Rams, was a top 10 and top 9 in points this past year in 2023. And obviously that correlates because if the offense is bad, then most likely 10 out of 10, the quarterback play was bad. And let's look at that quarterback play in 2022. I mean, this is a quarterback carousel for his whole career. Nick Foles in 2020, Mitch Trubisky in 2021, Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, and then you saw Justin Fields come in 2022. Obviously Justin Fields, Trevor Siemian, Nathan Peterson. This past year, Justin Fields and Tyson Bagent there. But now he's going to Kirk Cousins in 2024. Going back to the points per game, looking at Kirk Cousins in the offense that he was in for the last couple of years in 2022. Obviously, different team, but think about it. It's a high-powered offense still with Zach Robinson. He's coming in, and things are changing, but Kirk Cousins has still been in the top half of, I guess, the points per game in the fantasy or in the league perspective. In 2020, 11th in points per game. In 2021, 13th. In 2022, 18th. In 2023, this past year, obviously 22nd because he got injured. So keep that in mind. But he's always been in that top half in a high-scoring offense. Can Darnell Mooney be a top 24 wide receiver? Once again, flex options, 100%. Why? Because he's done that before. In 2021, when Allen Robinson went down, he was wide receiver 23. Obviously, he was peppered with targets. There was no one else on that team. But now there's a little bit more of a better supporting cast there with Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, of course. And you're probably saying, where's the workload going to be coming from? You know, where are these? What's going to be happening? What are your expectations? If he can be a flex option and average me 12 to 14 points in that flex, and that's even a high ask. Let's just say 10 to 12 points. For example, a Jacoby Myers. Can he play that Jacoby Myers-esque role where we saw him be great alongside Devontae Adams? And I think that is something that we could potentially see from Darnell Mooney in this offense going into the 2024 season.
Yeah. Look, for me, I'm not that excited about Darnell Mooney.
Sure.
I think you mentioned some of my concerns, you know, just the fact that he is, in my opinion, probably the fourth option on an offense and signing the long-term deal. You know, if London, Pitts, and Bijan are all healthy, I just struggle to see when he becomes a starter. You know, the one time you could start him was 2021, and that was because there was no one else in that offense. You talked about that, but I don't know, man. With him already being an older guy, I would comfortably sell him at this point, but I can see where you're coming from. There could be, if Drake London goes down with an injury, who knows what's possible.
I think, and when you look into this offense, there's no one else here. It's outside in the wide receiver room specifically.
Sure.
Right, yeah, you have Rondell Moore and you have all these other players, but I'm not necessarily excited about them because who have they invested in? They invested in Darnell Mooney if they do go down. But I understand your concerns.
Yeah. All right, my last guy, Pop Douglas.
Pop.
If you know, you know. I don't think he should be ruled out in like this Pats wide receiver core, and it feels like the discourse in this offseason is, well, it's either Polk or it's Javon Baker. That's it. There's no other outcome. That kind of feels the way the Dynasty community is leading this. Mm-hmm. For me, I think Pop has every right to be in that conversation as, he could be the guy in 2024. If Brissett starts, he could be a guy you could flex. And the community right now is making it very clear how they feel about this room. If you look at Keep Trade Cut and Flock Fantasy community rankings on average, Jalen Polk's around 52, Baker is around 70, and Pop Douglas around 79. And Pop was really the only bright spot on this team all of last year offensively. Yeah. Like, no disrespect to Ramondre Stevenson. He was underwhelming. Obviously, the quarterback play was bad.
Yeah.
But Pop Douglas was really like the one like shining star that you were like, you know what? There could be something really nice here. He became a starter for the team from week 7 onwards. And from that time period, you can see his snap percentage jumps. He averages about 7 targets per game, almost 10 fantasy points per game. And that was with a combination of Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. Jacoby Brissett automatically is the best quarterback that Pop Douglas has ever played with. Okay? Mm-hmm. And what happens if Drake May actually does have a CJ Stroud type of season? Remember, this time last year, nobody was talking about CJ Stroud as like the next, God on earth that we're all supposed to praise, right?
Yeah.
And even in preseason, CJ Stroud, his first game threw an interception, and people were like, oh no, Ohio State quarterbacks. No one ever gives people time, right?
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, what if Drake May comes out of nowhere, has a actually decent season? Pop Douglas absolutely could improve his value drastically. I think he's a very talented player. I think if you redid that NFL draft last year in 2023, he would go much higher than where he went. Same with Puka Nacua, but obviously to a different extent.
Sure.
But I think Pop Douglas has a real chance to catapult himself into the top 50 of wide receiver rankings. Right now, he's comfortably outside the top 75. I think he has a good chance to propel himself into that top 50 with a good year in 2024. So, again, a guy that I want to throw in any trade. Definitely if he's on the waiver wire, I want to stash him everywhere I can.
Yeah, and I think, if you can't get your hands on Polk or Baker, Pop Douglas is just as good, or at least the expectation and the hope is just as good with what we saw this past year, like, Zach was saying, from weeks 7 to 18 onwards.
By the way, if coach speak means anything to you, if the drum beat means anything,
sure.
Pop Douglas has been like the guy in training camp, in OTAs and all that so far for the Patriots. So
yeah, no, definitely makes sense. All right, Take us home. My last player. Let's get straight to it. Rashad Bateman, and
this hurts my heart.
It does hurt my heart, but I think there is hope with some context I'm going to be bringing here.
It's like remembering an ex that it was like a really bad breakup and all the memories come flooding back. I remember drafted round 1 to the Ravens. I was like, I love this dude.
I think now with the context I'm bringing, you're going to be like, man, like that was a good relationship. It just didn't work out. And I think,
we were, maybe good, but we weren't the one.
Yeah, we weren't the one. But now with the hope that I'm bringing, hopefully, is going to be the one. Okay, so what's gone wrong for Rashad Bateman? I think it's pretty obvious. Injuries. That has been the biggest downfall for Rashad Bateman coming in his whole career, essentially, right? He hasn't been the same. He hasn't been able to string in, training camp or even a season together because of the laundry list of injuries he's been dealing with. Obviously, some groin strains, 2 groin strains at 2 different points in time. He had a Liz Frank injury. He also had a thigh sprain and all these other injuries coming into the 2023 season. But what's more important is the context that I actually found that I thought was really interesting coming into last year of something that he said in an interview. And in summation here, and maybe we can put this on the screen. In summation, he's saying that he wasn't 100%, and he didn't even know coming into the 2023 season if he was even going to play. What he did was that he went through these things to try and get onto the field, rehab, and he tried to play. But even when he tried, he was still playing very, very injured, and he tried to make the most of it. And by the end of it, he was like, I just can't do it because my foot took a left turn, essentially. So keep that in mind when you think about Rashad Bateman of last year, is that he probably wasn't even going to play in 2023. And he did with those multiple games. I think he played 8 games this past year. And it was up and down, obviously inconsistent, was unsure that, once again, if he was going to be playing going into the 2023 season. But there is belief in Rashad Bateman. Okay, and let me remind you that Rashad Bateman was first round pick in 2021 for the Baltimore Ravens, and he can easily be, they could have easily drafted a wide receiver in this deep 2024 class in multiple rounds. Yes, they drafted Tez Walker, but he wasn't somebody that we were high on or we believed in the pre-draft process in our mind. So this kind of tells us that the Baltimore Ravens really love Rashad Bateman and believe that if he stays healthy, he can do something, because you have Zay Flowers in the wide receiver room, specifically Zay Flowers, and then Rashad Bateman, and then it falls off. Nelson Aguilar, Tylan Wallace, Tez Walker. I mean, there's no one else on this team to take these opportunities. Obviously, you have Mark Andrews and Derrick Henry, but these guys, Rashad Bateman is clearly the wide receiver 2 on this team if he can stay healthy, and the talent is there. He has all the abilities to run every single route. He was a phenomenal route runner coming out of Minnesota. He was somebody that we said he could play all over the field, and we were excited when he went to the Baltimore Ravens because he can play, once again, every single position. He just couldn't stay healthy. And with everything that's been happening with Rashad Bateman, they're clearly telling you that, the Baltimore Ravens are telling us to draft Rashad Bateman to get him on your team and see if he can stay healthy. So in my opinion, there's still hope for Rashad Bateman. And look, he hasn't done much on the field. He hasn't really been as exciting. And obviously I didn't bring any of that, but the context with those injuries that he probably wasn't even going to play this past year is pretty significant going into this year. And he's, all the praise has been talking about him, especially on Coach Speak Index as well. So I'm going to take a shot on Rashad Bateman here.
It's like, going back to the relationship part, you think back to certain relationships that you've had in the past and you think, those were good times, but I don't think it's good for my mental health to go back to that person. That's where I stand right now. I don't know if my mental health can take it. I think it's better for us to be in a different part of our lives right now, because there's been so much hurt. Can we really rekindle it?
Can we really rekindle?
But I do love Rashad Bateman, the player. I hope he stays healthy, so anything is possible for sure.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Those are some stashes that we love. Let us know your favorite stash down below. Like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Much love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.